Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and happy Wednesday on our Thursday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope everybody is doing well out there. Obviously, Brendan Boylan and myself, Bob Rose, have have decided to exercise our power of changing days of the week again, bringing you your Bayou Blitz on a Thursday evening. And we want to thank you for everybody that is joining us, either live or going back when you have some time and watching it. Hope everybody's doing well out there. It's our first episode of the 2024 off season, and Brendan Boylan, my friend, I'm sure it's going to be a slow news off season. What do you think?
Slow news. There's not going to be any dramatic changes to the roster. All sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's just going to be slow. We're going to be able to sleep through it. We can hibernate right now. No, this is going to be a crucial one. I think over the last few years, I've been guilty of saying, "Oh, this is the most crucial offseason in Saints history," or whatever. I don't know if I'd go that far this year. Some of those years where the window was closing, I certainly said that. But this offseason, it's a fork in the road type of offseason.
Yeah.
Right? Do you want to continue down the path that has led you to 3 consecutive seasons being a game out of the playoffs or a half game out of the playoffs, or however you guys want to look at that? Or do you guys, do you want to get off this exit of the highway per se and try a different route? There's been a lot of rumblings, a lot of things we'll get into, but this will certainly be a loud one. And I know there's a lot of you that are upset because 25% of the league has fired head coaches or head coaches retired, and the Saints are not one of those 25%. Right now it sounds like Dennis's job is safe. I don't think there's any sense of urgency to, put Carmichael's name out there as potentially being on the hot seat. So I don't really know what's going on there, what's going to happen there, but no, it's not going to be quiet at all. So hopefully you guys understand Bob's sarcasm by this point. Trav, hello. Elite, hello. Eric, rolling through Fort Worth through snow here in Dalhart, Texas. Well, be careful driving.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got your football, but be careful driving. I have some cold weather I'm going to have to go into here in the next couple of weeks myself. So
we're going to be looking at single digits up here through the weekend. So so there's that. Now the Christmas decorations are put away, and now comes the cold-hearted stab of January and February. And it's an even deeper stab. If you have a team that you're rooting for in the NFL playoffs, at least you can have that to lean back on through January, and depending on how good your team is and how deep a run they make into late January or perhaps even early February. But obviously, Brendan, the last 3 years we haven't been able to count on the New Orleans Saints to keep us warm in January.
No.
The Saints have made the biggest headlines by making no moves. As you put out, you call it a fork in the road. I feel almost like this is the Titanic, and the decision is: do you hit the iceberg head on, or do you decide to scrape it down the side? I know that's the approach that a lot of the fan base, at least on social media, are taking. A lot of you are already waving the white flag on the 2024 season. I could see it. Listen, I get your frustration. I do, and I'm right there with you. Even as a member of the media, I'm not alone in feeling that way either. But to completely give up on this, you're talking about a New Orleans Saints team this past season who Brendan and I both agreed and said several times that it was not a good football team. Yet you're literally a missed field goal away from a playoff, or away from hosting a playoff game. Really you can make a strong case for this team winning 3 more games and finishing at what would that be, a 12-5 record, without too much of a stretch if you go back and look at some of the things that's happened to the Saints. Having said that, if they would have finished 12-5, it may have been the least impressive 12-5 finish in NFL history. But yeah, yet here we are. My point in saying that is I think it's very presumptuous, even with Dennis Allen as head coach, even with a roster that massively underachieved in spots, and definitely showed their age in other spots. This team still found a way to almost reach the playoffs this year. So, there are some positives to take into this offseason. There really are.
I think there's more positives than the fan base wants to give credit for. Now, the negative things you could focus on, cap hell version 29 or however many years this has gone on. The Saints will find their way out of it. They always do. They find a way to get out of it and have a decent, have a decent offseason in terms of acquisitions. So, not too concerned there. Negatives, I mean, I see some of the comments there. Eric says Hall of Famers get fired from their jobs, but we keep Dennis Allen. Yes. The only thing I'll say there is the Hall of Famers that are getting fired or released or shown the door professionally and told to retire, like that type of thing, or however some of those things were. Like Pete Carroll's in his 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Belichick is also in his 70s, or he's right there at it. If you're talking about Saban, you want to throw that in there. Saban's like 72. Dennis Allen made us all feel that old at times, pulling our hair out. But Dennis is not in his 70s, and we've addressed this a lot, and we will continue to address it throughout however much longer DA is in charge. Is the 3-year rule, unwritten 3-year rule, when it comes to New Orleans and their coaches. And I know Bob's throwing the number out there and the stat out there, like since Tom Benson bought the team, there hasn't been an instance where a coach hasn't at least got the beginning of a third season. So I don't see that necessarily going on, but this is a good segue to a topic I wanted to get a little insight in on from you, Bob, and we were talking about it a little bit before we got on the air, and that was Jeff Duncan's article report that came out earlier this morning, about 12 hours ago, actually, and that was the title of it was "Inside the Saints' Cultural Issues."
Mm-hmm.
Can Dennis Allen and the Saints right the ship? So I want to read just a little bit of a blurb from that, and we can kind of get into it, right? Jerry, thanks for joining. See you in the chat. Good to see a familiar name pop across the screen. But these are some little blurbs from this. In wake of the midseason swoon when the Saints lost consecutive games to the Falcons, Vikings, Lions, some segments of the locker room were splintered according to multiple sources. The key word is splintered. I'll continue a little bit. It should be noted that this is not uncommon. The high stakes pressure of the NFL can create fissures in a locker room. As the season progressed, attention to detail waned. Some players were late to meetings at some road trips, buses to and from the stadium rolled in late. At one point in midseason, an audit revealed dozens of players had not been using their Microsoft tablets to study the team's digital playbook during their off times from the facility, an issue that was quickly addressed and corrected by some team leaders. Another example is an increasing number of players and staff began parking in a smaller public parking lot at the team's training facility rather than the larger gated reserved for them lot on the other side of the facility. Some players even regularly parked in the lots for handicapped spots. At times, this created an unnecessary shortage of parking at the facility. Bob, there's a couple things you could read into that. Some of those things I'm not as concerned about as others. Splintered's a tough word, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about broken locker rooms. We talk about losing the locker room. Splintered locker rooms. I think the ones that stand out for me personally, being around teams over the years, game day transportation, in and out of facilities. Now, albeit mine more so at the collegiate level, a little experience at the pro level. Um, the thing is the random audit of film and the lack thereof watching it. Now, the article says, and the report say it was quickly corrected. It's one thing to say an audit happens and 2 or 3 guys aren't doing it, but when you say it's a handful of players, well, like, what's a handful?
Right.
Right? And that's a good question. Some people just say, like, a handful to me is like 5 to 7, to where a handful to you could be more than that, less than that. What is a handful? That's a little concerning because we don't know the direct number. It's a little vague, right? We don't know. I will say this, and interestingly enough, this is another thing you and I talked about before we got on air, was transportation to and from, right? You coached at the high school level.
Mhm.
I took a lot of team transportation when I covered Gardner Webb at the collegiate level, so I was also on those schedules.
I
And so,
remember too. I played at a collegiate
right,
level too, so I
yeah,
had that.
Penn State. So you have that, and then I have a little experience with bus schedules at the pro level here in Charlotte too. So the thing is, you're given a time that the bus leaves, and it's really just be on the bus at this time.
Mhm.
Now, to and from transportation being late could be a handful of things. It could be the bus is running late. It could be a bus has a bad tire, something happened, yada, yada, yada. All of us get stuck in traffic every day, so you guys kind of get the gist. But some of that also is just being late. And that also ties into the part where Jeff was talking about players being late to team meetings. Because guess what? If if a team's at a hotel and they got to take 4 or 5, let's say 4 buses, let's make an even number, to the stadium. Bus 1 might leave at, if it's a 1 o'clock game, bus 1 might leave at 9 a.m. Bus 2 might be 9:30, 10:30, or 10 and then 10:30, right? Well, if you're the last bus, right? Like if you're at 9 o'clock and they leave you there, they know you're getting on the 9:30 bus. But if it's the last bus, guess what? They're waiting for you.
Mhm.
So if I rolled out of bed a little late, I'm packing up, I look at the clock and I go, "Oh, that bus leaves at 10:30." I look at my clock and it's 10:45. I know they're not leaving me, but that's a problem too. It's the Zion struggled with this word the other night, right? It's the lackadaisical efforts potentially of showing up to things late, whether it be meetings, whether it be bus schedules. It's the, I don't really have to look at film today, all those sorts of things. Bob, when this article and piece came out this morning, what was your initial reaction to all of it?
Um, I wasn't surprised by a lot of the things that Jeff said. We've talked about it on this show several times. I've written about it. Me, and Alan have talked about it on Under the Dome. The New Orleans Saints were an extremely undisciplined team. From the top, the coaching staff, down to the last player on the 53-man active roster. That was very clear. In several games where they came out very unprepared, very lazy, very lost. So if they're playing like that, then you damn well better believe that their film study and their practice habits and every little nuance down to being able to board a team bus on time, are also going to be affected. That's just, and again, that's a mark of a bad football team. A lot of people like to blame Dennis Allen for a lot of things. This should be one of them. If a player or a group of players, regardless of how big or small, are exhibiting this kind of behavior and they're getting away with it, then the first step of disciplinary action should be the coach. The second step, followed very closely behind, should be the locker room leadership. The locker room in general. If you and I are teammates and you're not holding up your end, I'm going to get in your face about it, especially if I'm working my ass off. And we've heard a lot of this since DA's spineless actions following the Atlanta Falcons victory. It's a matter, it's partially a matter of players not having respect for the coaches. But that's where the blame for Dennis Allen should stop, because the players are also, as humans and as competitors, responsible for doing the film study, hitting curfew if there's a bed check, boarding the damn team bus. Your general physical, mental, and emotional preparation for a football game that you are getting paid handsomely to play. So even though it is a reflection on the coaching staff, and a very, very poor one, it's an equal, and through my eyes, it's an equal reflection on these individual players. Obviously, the ones that are guilty of these infractions, but also the locker room leaders. Even if they aren't physically guilty of it, you better darn well be sure that they are aware of it. And again, as a player, you usually do kind of sit back, wait to see how your coach is handling it. And if your coaches aren't handling it the way they should, or even the way that you believe that they should, then at that point you step in. So it's just undisciplined behavior from the top all the way down to the last man associated with this franchise.
And like you said, we've talked about it a lot, throughout the year, in terms of there feeling like there was a disconnect from the top to the bottom. I'm not just talking about coaches and players, but from the top down. And when reports come out like this, it tells you that all of your suspicions were true. But the other thing I want to highlight in that is one of the first things I said, and that's Jeff saying this isn't uncommon. Like this isn't something that just affects the New Orleans Saints, right?
No, it's things that bad football teams do.
You're right, right. Bad organizations. You look at not just football, not just sports. Bad organizations have these habits, right? And there's no discipline and there's no accountability, and this and that. There was another part of that where Jeff's article talked about players expressing frustration that certain players were not held accountable. That included Derek Carr. You and I had some healthy conversation throughout the year. It's a good way of saying that. I'm going to have to write that one down. Keep that in the memory bank. We had a healthy conversation on where we thought this team was and where this locker room was with Derek Carr throughout the year. Some of that because of Derek Carr's actions. Some of that because of other players' actions. Other times just because, well, the Saints were bad, right? Having read that, do you have any concerns about a splintered relationship between Derek Carr and the team? And I want to take that a step further with a follow-up question. And this might be going really deep in Mary Poppins' bag. But do you have any additional concerns after the levels of support that you've seen this team give Jameis Winston over the last few weeks? And how there might be a potentially divided locker room?
If you're asking me, divided locker room between Jameis Winston and Derek Carr, no. No, I don't believe that. I think the team has just come to support the players, have supported Jameis Winston as a human being, as a teammate, as their friend, as a fellow warrior. As the guy who essentially jumped on the sword that Dennis Allen thrust up there, instead of going down down a list of names. Jameis said, I called the play, but we all agreed. And et cetera. So we're not going to rehash all that again. But I don't believe that the locker room is splintered or fractured or divided as far as this part wants Jameis Winston as the quarterback and this part wants Derek Carr. No, they're two separate entities in this case. But am I concerned about the feelings towards the clearly preferential treatment given to Derek Carr and probably select others. Yeah, and I have been very concerned since early in the season, as you alluded to, when we had our healthy conversations. I showed concern then, and I pointed out the potentially fatal flaw in that kind of approach, by the coaching staff and the very top of the organization. Now, I think the team as a whole came together very well down the stretch. I mean, winning 4 or 5 helps, but in your last 2 games, especially, 2 must-haves as far as winning. And you went out and dismantled 2 divisional rivals. I think the team was feeling very good about themselves, on the field, and it was fairly evident to me that they had a closer relationship down the stretch, the players between themselves. Because if you recall, when we would have those earlier conversations, or when I would go off on the occasional tangent, it would be when Derek Carr was alienating teammates, not only by admonishing them and eviscerating them verbally, but really no support on that sidelines. It wasn't only Carr, it was Olave for a period of time, it was Kamara for a period of time, but obviously everything reflects on your quarterback. Since the decision had been made probably a while ago that Dennis Allen was coming back, that simultaneously meant that Derek Carr was going to be your quarterback. So the question has to be asked, and it will never be honestly answered by the players wearing the New Orleans Saints uniform in 2024. But the question still needs to be asked. How much do you truly support Derek Carr because of the clearly preferential treatment that he's gotten? Do you believe that this is a man you can play for? People are asking that about Dennis Allen. Hey, is this a guy that these Saints players are going to play for? The same identical question has to be asked about the quarterback, because that's the guy that's on the field in battle with you. If you were to ask me a week ago at this time, I'd have said, I feel pretty strongly, that the Saints players that will be on this team next year, will play pretty hard for Derek Carr and vice versa. But now you have to wonder, because if Carr is the coach's darling, the coach's son, as the saying goes, and that isn't always the case, but you know what I mean by that saying. If Carr is the coach's son, then how hard are you going to play for that guy, knowing that if you make the same mistake that he makes, he's going to be patted on the butt with encouragement, and you're going to get people in your face, throwing you under the bus in the media, and eviscerating you in the team meetings and film studies. That's a hard pill to swallow if I'm a player.
Oh, yeah. Let's get to some of these questions out here. The first one from Jerry: what happened to you guys on Wednesday? That was me. I had somebody in town that I don't get a chance to see a whole lot, and I wanted to take advantage while they were in Charlotte for not even 24 hours. So that one's on me.
Brendan has friends. He knows how to treat them. On the other hand, I don't have that problem. So you won't, if I have to cancel on Wednesday, it's because of an illness. It's not because of friends.
I mean, listen, I thought I treated you pretty good when you were up in
You
the
did.
Queen City. So let's see what else we got going on. We'll just go here in order. Eric asks, do you think they're living off a bygone history of the Saints, the Sean Payton era? I mean, it's an interesting question. I think the more politically correct way to ask that question, if that's I don't even know if that's the politically correct way of saying that. But anyway, who cares? We're not a PC show. But I think the question really is, do Gale and Mickey still see a window of opportunity to be a competitive team in the NFC? And while you can take the Sean Payton era and kind of divide that pretty evenly, I think that's what the real question is not so much are we living in the past or because of Sean Payton, or is it a situation where we're living in the past and we are beyond the fact that we could be a competitive franchise? The answer to that question a year ago was the Saints still feel like they can be a competitive franchise because they paid a boatload of money to Derek Carr. So with that in mind, my opinion on it, I still think that they have an opportunity to be competitive when the NFC South. I mean, look, the last 3 years, they're a game away each year.
Mhm.
So I think they're going to live in that as long as they can. And Bob and I say this every offseason. At some point, you got to pay the piper,
Mhm.
right? And at some point, the Saints are going to have to stop doing this. We'll pay the debt next year and then restructure. And like at some point, the Saints are just going to have no money to pay anybody and be extremely over the cap or what have you, right? That's how it's going to be. Next question, unless you have any thoughts on that, Bob.
Uh, No, I don't think the coaching staff, is living off of the achievements of the Sean Payton regime. And I don't think the players are anymore either. The players that were holdovers, from when Payton was here, because they know how this team has played. I do question the front office, not necessarily living off the Sean Payton good faith years, but more. I want to try to be as least controversial as I can with this statement, but still get my point across. I'm beginning to question how much the front office and ownership cares about truly winning a championship. And I say that because you're keeping Dennis Allen. You are not only keeping Dennis Allen, you have clearly thrown your full support behind Dennis Allen, thereby, in my opinion, giving the middle finger, both middle fingers to the players in that locker room, who I think a vast majority of, I'm not going to say want Dennis Allen gone, but are certainly okay with the coaching change. Uh, and if you're not going to support your players and you're going to continue to throw your full support behind a coach that's mired in mediocrity or low or worse in every way that a coach can be, I'm not going to pull out the numbers again right now, but I will plenty of times this offseason. That I now question the commitment to winning that Gail Benson has as the owner, and the trickle down effect through the team president, through the general manager, through the scouting department. And I think the finger of blame now has to be pointed at them.
Brendan's sidebar comment of the night. I've always had a problem with how connected ownership slash upper management is between the Pelicans and the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can give one the full attention it deserves if you also have to look after the other. And I think
Yeah.
that is also why neither of those teams have been successful at the same time. But I will get
And listen, that's a great point, and that's a point that our mutual friend, the late great Barry Hurstis, always made too. If you're going to have a few people carry over, and if you have the money to own two or three teams, more power to you. And are you hiring? But you have to have the divide at some point. You have to have football people run the football operations, basketball people run the basketball operations, and whatever other sports you want to throw in there. And that hasn't been happening with the Saints and Pelicans for quite some time, as you pointed out.
Charlotte's going through it too, with Tepper owning the Panthers, the soccer team, and is right now the front runner to buy the baseball team that's up for sale. So anyway, next question. Brian asks, what was the Loomis team meeting about? Any speculation? I think this got more attention this year than it ever has, because this happens almost every year. Loomis has meetings with maybe not the entire team, but it's your end of year meetings, right? Just like my full-time job has, right? You have end of year meetings. Most of your guys' full-time jobs you have end of year meetings, and you look at numbers and you talk about the year and what can improve and this and that. That's really what it was. But I think because of everything else, there's a little bit more to it. I know that there were some questions regarding Pete Carmichael's job. I know that there was a little bit more of a thorough investigation's not the right word, maybe a more thorough dive into the offense this year opposed to other years. But I mean, everything that I know is standard end of the year stuff. They looked at things a little bit more thorough this year, and we're trying to gather a little bit more information because of some of the issues that we talk about week in and week out. But other than that, I don't think it's too wild.
It's not unusual for that kind of meeting to take place. 100% in agreement with you there. But, and I'm making these comments based off of Mickey Loomis's comments out of his own mouth when asked about this meeting. This almost, according to Loomis, this almost sounded like the general manager telling the team, if you don't like the coach that we have, you're out the door. Don't talk at me like that. Any employer, and unfortunately, I have a history that will back me up personally on this one. You don't talk at me like that, and that's one of the reasons why I made the statement, a few moments ago that I did about, the management putting their full support behind a mediocre at best coach and giving the double middle finger to the players. Have the meetings, yeah. Let the players know who's ultimately in charge. Hey, whoever we hire, whoever is the coach, he's there to coach. I'm here as the general manager. You're here to play. So I mean, every now and then you have to define those lines, or at least remind people of them. But Mickey Loomis was so defiant when he was asked about it that's when I started to get the impression that all of a sudden the guys that are making these comments, kind of not underhanded but understated comments or non-comments when it comes to Dennis Allen or Dennis Allen's abilities or the player's relationship with Dennis Allen, maybe you're going to start to see some of those players gone. And sometimes you need to do that if there is any kind of fracture, and I think we all agree that there's something going on. But again, I thought the players did a far better job than the coaches did. I'm not absolving the players of this 9-8 finish of the underachieving and all that, but Loomis, he's always been to me a player-friendly general manager. Not this time. This just sounded like, guys, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but when asked, well, I just told the players that Dennis Allen's our guy, and F you if you don't like it because you're out of here now. I don't like that approach, especially after the most recent developments. And none of us were in that meeting. The players aren't going to comment specifically about what was said or what wasn't said, so we can only speculate. But again, I'm basing my speculation on how defiant Mickey Loomis was, and it left a bad taste in my mouth.
From what I understand, like I said, it's not unusual to have meetings, but this players only meeting was more what we talked about at the top, right? What we talked about at the top with Jeff Duncan's article and about culture. And I do have to applaud to an extent the upper management wanting to get a feel from the players on where does our culture lie.
I want to interrupt you, and I apologize for doing so. I didn't get the impression that they wanted to get a feel from the players. I got the impression that they were telling the players that this is the way it's going to be. And again, if you're gonna force the players to have accountability, I have no problem with that. But again, what kind of message does it send when you force the players to have accountability and you retain a coach that has shown zero accountability, negative amounts of accountability? To me, that's the wrong message.
Yeah, to come in and like you said, to speak at opposed to ask questions and gather information. With that said, players that May not have liked that. The next question is, do you think Jameis Winston will be back as a Saint? Bob, you ready? You ready for our answers? We can make this together on 3. 1, 2, 3. No.
No.
We'll work on the harmonizing for next one, but no, Jameis is not coming back. I would love Jameis to be back. I was very happy to see the amount of teammates, both past and present, that came to his defense, and also went online to say how he's the greatest teammate they've ever had.
Mhm.
And hopefully Jameis lands somewhere on his 2 feet where he gets an
Mhm.
opportunity to either compete for a starting job or be a guy who, is one of the top paid backup quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah, and
Brian
to be fair, I didn't think Jameis was going to be back in the New Orleans Saints in 2024. Prior to the Atlanta game, I didn't think he was going to be back from November, from October, from September. It is very clear that Dennis Allen does not trust Jameis Winston, that Pete Carmichael does not trust Jameis Winston. Yes, Jameis Winston is extremely well-liked and a terrific teammate. Personally, I root for the guy to do well. Was hoping it would be in New Orleans, and it's a shame it didn't work out that way. No, when I say absolutely not that Jameis Winston is not back, it has nothing to do, with what transpired at the end of the Atlanta Falcons game. That decision was made long time ago, months ago.
That decision was made last season when he was told he would get his starting job back and didn't.
Essentially.
Brian asks, since Mickey is in the will and pretty much untouchable, what will it take to get Carr and Allen out of here? I think it's really interesting, Bob, that a lot of this fan base, and you just kind of talked about it, saying coach's son. I'm not seeing a whole lot of get DA out of here or get Derek out of here. They're kind of intertwined,
Yeah.
because of what you said.
Yeah.
But listen, I think it would have to go catastrophically bad, right? And you guys might say, well, what's catastrophically bad? Like, I'm talking like 3-14, 4 and like you're gonna have to be in double-digit losses,
Mhm.
and then some. And Bob and I talked about this, and Bob kind of just alluded to it a second ago, talking about beating 2 division rivals at the end of the year. Like, the Saints did not look bad over the last month of the year. And Derek Carr's numbers were better than they ever had been. Now, if you guys are like really analytical people and want to dissect things, like Derek Carr was top 5 in the league in garbage time yards.
Yeah.
Whatever that, and that's a misleading stat too, because garbage time yards is calculated when your team is trailing. Well, it's not garbage time if you're trailing by 3, in the second quarter, but I digress. They both did enough over the last month, obviously, for Mickey and Gale to view them as safe for next season. And I think there's, at least for Derek, because of the amount of money. And I know his contract, well, after next season, the Saints could get off really easily. Yes. I still think it would have to go catastrophically bad. I think Derek's here for the long run. DA seats a little hotter, maybe a lot hotter, especially if they have a bad start next year. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it would have to be catastrophically bad. The Saints would have to dip really hard, and to go to Bob's little metaphor earlier with that sinking ship, they wouldn't scrape it, they wouldn't hit it. They would do a little bit more than hit the iceberg. They would have to demolish the iceberg, or the iceberg would have to demolish them.
Well, right now it feels like they're going.
Exactly. So for the it's gonna have to go it's gonna have to back up, gain momentum, and then it's just gonna get obliterated. That's how bad I think it's gonna have to be.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I've said it before. I've tweeted it. Yeah, as long as Dennis Allen is the coach, Derek Carr is going to be the quarterback, and as long as that happens, Saints fans forget, and I mean double F, forget uh, about drafting a quarterback in the first round. It was not going to happen. And it doesn't have anything to do with the money that they're paying Derek Carr. It has to do with the guy that they decided to retain as the head coach. And I know some of you have countered that by saying, well, that doesn't mean you can't draft a quarterback for the future. No, it doesn't. But two reasons why they wouldn't. A, they still believe, or at least they're telling us that they still believe that they're talented enough to go on a postseason run. So if that's the case, you don't use your quarterback, your high draft choice on a quarterback. You use it to fill the other immediate positions of need: offensive line, edge, linebacker, whatever. Fill in blank here. But reason number two, and this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's fact. The mob is at the castle gates calling for Derek Carr's head and Dennis Allen's head. If you have a rookie quarterback there, whether it's the guy that you wanted from LSU or Penix or Nix, whoever, I don't care who, if it's a first round quarterback, that gives more fuel to the fire. You might as well have your guards at the top of the castle gates dumping down buckets of ammunition to that mob at the gates to help them out. And they're not going to do that. They feel under fire enough. Dennis Allen is your coach, and Derek Carr is your quarterback. And like Brendan said, something catastrophic in the win-loss column would have to happen for that to change. I know it sucks. I don't agree with it personally, although I will echo Brendan's sentiments. I thought Derek played extremely well over the last 4, 5, 6, 7 games of the year. Certainly a much better quarterback than we saw the first half of the year. Do I believe he's a franchise quarterback? No. But it's irrelevant what I believe, because this is the duo that we're stuck with for at least one more year. Period.
Simple as that. And we will be happy to reiterate that throughout the next however many weeks we have to.
We're going to have to.
And we will. I already know. We're going to have to just write it down, have a script. What we'll do is we'll get teleprompters, and occasionally we'll mess with each other and have those Anchorman scenes with question marks and whatnot at the end. Let's see. Brian says, is this the maintained Peyton culture they really tried to sell us on? I mean, no, but I'm only chuckling because when Sean left, so did the Sean Payton culture.
Yeah.
And no matter how much fans, the organization, whoever wanted to sell us on the fact that DA was going to step in, it was going to be really similar. I mean, to a degree, yeah, you could say, well, he's been here, he knows. Here's the difference, right? For someone to step into a role who's been there for a long time, they know how the team operates.
Mhm.
That does not mean they bring the same culture as another coach. Sean Payton is one of one. You either love him or you hate him. And as a player, too, there's a lot of players that love him. There's a lot of guys that played for him that absolutely despised playing for him. There's examples in New Orleans, and there were certainly examples in Denver after the whole Russell Wilson thing. Go read some of the comments on Instagram by guys that he cut early on. So I think they tried to sell us or sell the fans on an idea that was never there, right? It was being you were being sold something that didn't exist. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I see a lot of comments in here about John Gruden. And so we will address it with our little bit of time left because we haven't addressed it yet. It's interesting, right? Like Gruden came in over the last training camp and for a little bit, and like that made some noise for a couple days. but he's kind of been lingering around. There's some rumors that the Saints might look for a move at offensive coordinator. Derek Carr's best NFL season came under John Gruden. I'm going to keep it really short and simple when it comes to John Gruden. Hell of a football coach.
Mhm.
It would not surprise me, as dysfunctional as this team has been for the last few years, to bring John Gruden in. Yes. My only problem, and it's a little more comical than it is serious, I don't know if you can be actively suing the NFL and then get a job working for an NFL team. Like
Brian Flores.
I mean, that's a good example. Hey, you're right. I don't see it making a whole lot of logical sense in the long run. But again, with how dysfunctional this organization has been, which baffles me.
Yeah.
Because for 15, 16 years, it was one of the cleanest operations, lock and key. Nothing came out of that organization, right? No rumors, no anything. And that was a lot of the Peyton era and the Peyton culture and all that stuff. But for the last 3 years, it's like a completely different organization top to bottom. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
You kept it short. I'll go a little bit more long-winded.
Do it.
First of all, John Gruden is a despicable human being. But sadly, there are plenty of despicable human beings with jobs in the NFL or other places where they shouldn't be. So that part, unfortunately, would not keep the New Orleans Saints from hiring him. Also, John Gruden wants to coach again. That's very, very clear. No NFL team in their right mind would touch him to be a head coach right now. So look at it through John Gruden's eyes and simultaneously through the New Orleans front office eyes. If you soured on Dennis Allen, whether it was a third of the way in, halfway in, 2/3 of the way in, if you're Gail Benson or even Mickey Loomis, if you soured on Dennis Allen, part way through this year, and this is why Brendan and I often just kind of snuffed out people that said, do you think DA will be fired during the season? No. A, the Saints have never done that, I said under Tom Benson. But B, who on the staff would they turn to? Doug Marrone? He's equally clueless, but really the only other one with any head coaching experience on his resume. So now you're the Saints and you look at this. You have to be a complete moron to not know that the fan base is 100%, 99.9% against you bringing Dennis Allen back. If you get off to a slow start or a bad start next year, and you look through your coaching staff, and you see a guy like John Gruden, a guy who has had head coaching success, a fairly good amount. And also, by the way, the same type of coach, demeanor-wise, that a guy named Sean Payton is. Remember, Sean worked for John Gruden. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier to make a move with Dennis Allen, to fire Dennis Allen during the season, if you can turn over the reins to an interim guy like John Gruden. Contrastly, John Gruden, he doesn't want to just coach. He wants to be the guy in charge. And if your DNA is that, then so be it. There's nothing wrong with that part. John Gruden sees what the New Orleans Saints are going through, sees how beleaguered Dennis Allen is, maybe not publicly by the organization, but certainly by the fan base. And again, I'm going to compare the mob at the Castle Door, make that comparison. How long can you keep that mob out from storming your gates? Eventually, you got to give them a head. And that head's probably going to be Dennis Allen. So if I'm John Gruden, I'm like, hey, if I'm on this staff, this could be my ticket back on the sidelines as a head coach. So through all those reasons, plus the fact that, as you said, Derek and John have a relationship, have a good relationship. That John has worked with Derek. John Gruden knows the plays Derek Carr likes. Derek Carr likes the type of offense that John Gruden runs. I actually, at this point now, and again, partially because of the dysfunctional, chaotic factor that the New Orleans Saints are spinning in right now, I expect John Gruden to be hired in some capacity. Perhaps not as offensive coordinator, could be as a quarterback coach, a senior offensive consultant, something to get him on that staff.
I'm glad you said senior offensive consultant because that's exactly where my mind was going. Just 3 business sounding words thrown together to give you a job title that may or may not actually exist. But it just gives you a spot in the building, and familiarize yourself with the team and what's going on, all that good stuff. Yeah. Senior offensive consultant would not surprise me at all. Because like you said, Bob, and it might not be DA. If the offense is absolute garbage to start the year and you want to get rid of Pete Carmichael, it's easy to go, Carmichael's out, senior offensive consultant, you're now the offensive coordinator. So all right, here's a good one. And this is from Kyle T. How do you sell hiring John Gruden based on the type of emails he was sending across the NFL? You can't.
No, Kyle, you can't. And again, I'm in full agreement with you. But how are you selling the fans that you're bringing back Dennis Allen as the coach, or perhaps bringing offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael back? The answer is the Saints aren't bothering to sell anything. They're just force feeding it down our throats. And and again, I wouldn't like the hiring of John Gruden because he is such a despicable human being. But if the Saints bring him in, they don't care what we think. They're just going to force feed us. So, to answer your question, you don't sell it because, as Brendan said, you can't sell it.
You can't. It's impossible. And you're going to have a lot of dirty looks from the fan base. And frankly, and I'm going to say this the nicest way that I know how, because it's not just the Saints. When you have an organization that is worth billions and billions and billions of dollars, frankly, they don't care. And the examples are across the board.
They don't care until it hits them in the pocket.
Right. But they haven't had an instance where it's hit them in the pocket yet. And I'm going with like the domestic violence guys that have got second and third chances across multiple leagues. A lot of people go, how do you justify bringing a guy like that back? And it's like, well, you can't, because they're despicable human beings, to, steal your quote. But teams in the league are like, well, this player is like a really flashy guy, so he's going to sell tickets. And and Kyle said it right as I said it. That's crazy. He said, people keep buying tickets. That's it. That's the reason. Kamo says, do players ignore those emails? No. The players know. Everybody knows, but it's one of those, that guy's my boss. What can your hands are tied, right? You're like, I can't do anything except maybe, run a fake kneel down instead of running the play that they call. I'm just kidding. All right, let's move on. Brian says, I'll be honest with you. This is Louisiana. A lot of fans don't care about what grew. And again, going back, it's not just Louisiana. It's not just the Saints. It's not just the NFL. Like, a lot of fans don't care as long as you're winning games and it's entertaining. They don't care. And that's its own issue. Like, Bob and I could probably have a 3-4 hour podcast on how that itself is its own issue, that, we forget that these are also people, and sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's a bad thing, right? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and you can flip-flop it. But people just don't care.
Well, I unfortunately, and it's a microcosm of society. Sports is often a microcosm of society. Kyle Mosley brings up the John Gruden emails. I'd bet dimes to dollars that a concerning number of the public doesn't even fully realize why John Gruden is not employed with an NFL team. They know he's not. They know he did some bad stuff, but if he gets back on a sideline and he starts winning, those same people are just going to forget all about that, because that's how short the attention span is. Of I almost want to say Americans, but I would make a large wager that it's the whole world in general, that it's society in general. And Kyle, unfortunately, obviously we know it too. But Kyle, unfortunately, a concerning amount of people, and I'm not going to guess to put a percentage on it, but if it's more than a couple percentage points, that to me is a concerning number of people. Don't even realize why John Gruden is just such a despicable individual, and that's only a couple of cases. But I mean, those emails and phone conversations, or rather texts, excuse me. That to me, that should have been enough to get him not only blackballed from the league, but cornered by a certain percentage of the population and beat within an inch of his life. If we want to stray away from PC a little bit.
Yeah, we still kept it within the PG to PG-13 rating, so that we're good. We're good. Well, and again, I mean, not to the same degree by any means with some of these examples, but to just go up there with the John Gruden examples. How long was Dan Snyder an owner? Right? And there was a long history of terrible things that Dan Schneider did, even before some of the later accusations came out. Just being a terrible person, a terrible businessman, this, that, and the other. Tepper hasn't done anything super crazy in terms of like said things or things have been leaked yet. But another example, and I went off on that rant for a little bit last week, terrible human being. They don't care. As long as the money comes in, they don't care. On to the next thing.
The last time I looked, Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Watson, among others, are still employed in the NFL. And we could go on and on and on and on and on.
People forget about it. And people forget about it. Last one, just because it's on my mind and I'm here in the city. There's a player here in Charlotte for the basketball team, the Hornets. Missed all of last year for domestic violence. Not once has it been brought up by the media after like his first 2 or 3 games back. Because he's playing not well. He's playing decent basketball. Woo. Anyway, we'll move on and close out on a good note. Greg Johnson says, like the CFL hat, my man. I appreciate it. I was waiting for the comment, honestly, even from Bob or somebody, but the tire cats.
And when you just leaned forward, I just saw it, but I didn't see.
Yeah, I guess if I'm going like this, you can't really see. Yeah, Hamilton Tire Cats hat. Yeah, CFL is good football. I mean, if you guys like it, it's confusing. The rules are different. It takes time to adjust, but it's a good game. There's good talent up there. We've had a couple guys on the show that spent time in the CFL. Willie Whitehead spent time in the CFL. Our buddy Delvin Bro is in the CFL. So, no, there's been a lot of good talent to come out of Canada. I hope they figure out a way to keep it long term. I know they were struggling financially there for a little bit. There's only a handful of teams left, but yeah, good football. I appreciate it.
Well, and I'm rooting for the USFL, XFL mutated version. I'm rooting for them to be a success. I'm a football guy. I like good football.
Yeah, well, I was really hoping when the XFL and the CFL opened up communications about potentially merging, those died really quick. But I was hoping that'd be cool to have like a Canada, North America, like Super Bowl or whatever they called it. Like the CFL would be one conference and the XFL would be another. That would have been awesome.
The North American Bowl, I am here for it.
The North American Bowl, yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. All right, let's end on some daughter drop. I did see one from DJ, and I do want to get to it before we get off. And he wanted some draft stuff. So daughter drop. You don't even want to get into it yet.
I'm just starting my. And this is if Kyle, if you're still watching, one of the reasons why I'm slacking on my publishings is I'm trying to get an early jump or a fairly early jump on extensive draft studies. The ones that I didn't watch during the season. But yeah, shoot, hit me.
I was gonna say daughter drop. The Saints draft on the offensive side of the ball with their first 2 picks of the draft?
First two. And again, to be able to answer this question fully, you got to see how the draft board plays out. I'm going to drop mainly because offensive line, I think, is the biggest area of need, and I not just the tackles, interior too, but what are they going to? Andrus Peat, James Hurst. Are both pending free agents, as are Trey Turner, who they were really excited about signing before he got hurt. Cam Irving, who played reasonably well at the end of the year. What are they going to be able to bring back any or all of those guys? If so, this is still a need for this team, inside and outside. So I fully believe I'd bet a sizable sum that one of their first 2 draft picks is at that position. But I mean, edge rusher was near horrible this year. Off-ball linebacker Demario's still very, very good. Pete Werner had a slip, and you had nobody behind him. Safety, Tyrann Mathieu played well. Marcus May, disappointment. Jordan Howden, I like, but jury's still out on him. Jonathan Abram, not a long-term answer. Same with Lonnie Johnson. So safety's a need. They have needs on this team. So to be able to say, especially in January, that the first 2 picks need to be on offense or need to be on defense, and obviously not knowing how the draft board is going to play out, I got to drop that one. It wouldn't surprise me, but I'm still going to drop. My turn?
What you got?
Daughter dropped. The New Orleans Saints obviously made a decision weeks and weeks ago that Dennis Allen was coming back for a 3rd season. But daughter dropped after the spineless actions of him following the Atlanta Falcons game. The Saints should have flip-flopped and fired Dennis Allen immediately.
I'll drop it. I mean, we talked about it a little bit. Like, I fully disagreed with throwing guys under the bus, right? But for that to be the flip-flopping decision, I don't necessarily agree with it. This is what I'll say about that. I'm really curious onto how that whole situation leaks its way. I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but we'll try it. Leaks its way into pending free agency and players who, like Marshawn Lattimore or like Alvin Kamara, who was thrown into some of the discussions over the last year or so. How does that affect their status with the team?
Mm-hmm.
Because going back to what we were talking about with Jameis, look at the amount of guys that came out in full support of Jameis Winston. Didn't see any of those guys coming out and fully supporting Dennis Allen. I do think it's going to have
Mickey Loomis did.
Bob, you're supposed to help me with my points. I'm just kidding. I think, and that too, you can kind of throw that too. Like, that is a direct, I don't want to say it's all of that was not a direct effect, but that is a direct effect in a way from all of that played out. So I'm just curious to see how that moment ends up kind of ripple affecting everything else. Mm-hmm. I don't think that would have been like the straw that broke the camel's back to flip-flop, but I do think you're going to see repercussions for, I don't want to say those actions, but yeah, you're going to see repercussions for what happened, because you're going to have players that don't want to be here, don't want to play for them, and free agents that are like, you know what, guys, like, I saw how that situation was handled. Why the hell would I want to go there? So I'll drop it, but it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Daughter drop. The New Orleans Saints will land a high dollar unexpected free agent. To put an example, because high dollar is a little vague, it didn't work out, but so just bear with me, because I know you're going to roll your eyes. but like Jarris Bird was
I
a
knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
$5 free agent. You knew exactly where I was going.
I
But
did.
that's a good example. Someone that the Saints had no business going and getting that summer. The Saints land somebody like that this summer.
For a mammoth contract, I'll drop a name free agent that people recognize and has maybe made a couple of Pro Bowls, a la Jarris Bird, Derek Carr, somebody like that, a name that is considered near the top. Whether they have to spend a lot of money for him or not, is other than otherwise not the point. I'm going to dot it, because the Saints do that almost every year. Again, they might not have to spend a lot of money in doing so. That's what I kept telling people, even during Sean Payton's 7 and 9 seasons, when, by the way, a lot of the fan base wanted him gone then. You couldn't say that the organization was not making an attempt at winning. They were bringing in Jarris Bird, Brandon Browner, Kobe Fleener, signings that had everyone excited at the time. CJ Spiller, others. Now they turned out to be flops, but that happens when you play the free agent market. Yes. Thereby I'm going to boomerang myself around again and say, you couldn't question the front office's commitment at winning then. Now you can, and I do. But nevertheless, I still think they have to do something. I think they know that they have to do something, to at least stave off the mob at the castle doors. Free agency, especially for you people that believe Madden football, is the real life NFL. That's going to stave off that fraction, of the fan base. So I will dot it. They'll sign somebody. I don't know if it'll be a difference maker, but it'll be a recognizable name that'll appease a fraction of the fan base.
Pammy just said, never say Browner's name, Bob.
I feel that way. Yeah. And Brendan knows it makes me physically nauseous every time one of two names are said, Jarris Bird or CJ Spiller. So I get it.
CJ Spiller, really?
Yeah.
That name gets to you?
I'm not sure that I would apply my brake if CJ Spiller was crossing the road in front of me.
Ouch. And maybe it's because of the area and I grew up in during that time of college football. But like, he's worshipped.
Oh, he was a hell of a college player and won one great year in Buffalo. And then then he broke every bone in his body when he signed that contract and never healed.
Well, listen, he gave us that walk-off touchdown against
he did.
Dallas.
He did.
Drew's 400th, and then he had one of the 7 in that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I remember CJ Spiller for in New Orleans.
That's because those are the only 2 plays he was on the field for.
And that's fine. But we have memories of it. All right. Oh man. All right. Give me the last daughter drop of the night.
All right, daughter drop. Marshawn Lattimore has played his last game in a New Orleans Saints uniform.
Man, you're making me like physically ill this early in the offseason.
You started it.
I didn't know CJ Spiller was a trigger word. I'm sorry.
You knew Jarris Bird was.
I did. But that was the only example that came to mind. Like Tyrann Mathieu, like, maybe, but the money wasn't like egregious. But anyway, oh man, I'm gonna dot it, and it hurts. Like, it really hurts me to say it. But there's been a disconnect the last couple years. He's been hurt more. And while I still think it's really hard to find a good corner, like a lockdown corner like that. Now, we said it the last show when we were talking about Lattimore, and I threw out names like Richard Sherman, Jarrell Revis. Like, I put Lattimore on that type of level. And I mean, shoot, Revis going to the Hall of Fame, right? So that's the level I see Lattimore when he's at his peak, and maybe his best years are behind him. And the Saints secondary was good this year. They were good. Paulson Debo had a hell of a year. And I think moving on from Lattimore also allows you to move Taylor back outside, where I think he was frankly better. So yeah, I do. I do think he's played his last game. I think there's a rift between coaching, front office, and him, what have you. I think it's been evident the last few years, and this is just a good. And the restructuring the contract was one thing that I think was the final nail in the coffin. And hopefully they get some draft picks for him, and he plays well wherever he goes, and gets a chance to play for a competitive football team. But yeah, unfortunately, I think we've seen the last of 23. I did not want to end the show like that. Dang.
It's depressing, but
And here's the other thing. I guarantee you it's not the only one that's like that this summer. I
no,
guarantee you there's another one or two where you go, damn, like,
Yeah.
it's over.
Yeah.
Mike Thomas is probably going to be one of those guys. Some of you I know in the chat were over Mike Thomas a while back, but for me, it's like it's the end of that. I talked about windows earlier, right? It's the end of that window. Like the official close of that window, because they were wedging stuff in that window to keep it open, and the window's finally closing. And I won't go as far to say Kamara, but
No,
I think
not
those two guys for sure, Lattimore and Thomas, have played their last games here, and that's tough. It's tough to find. It's tough because it's going to be the what if part of that window. It really is, those guys, for sure. On that note, Bob, Kyle T jumped in here for a little bit. That was nice. It was nice. You guys have a lot of work to do between the off season. What we said was going to be what am I talking about? You guys are going to have a quiet off season. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be really easy. We're not going to have any more articles that come out talking about culture. We're not going to be talking about potential coaching staff moves, right? Like, none of that stuff's going to happen this off season. We don't have to, be ready to be on like a telethon for the draft for like 14 straight hours. I'm just kidding. All that stuff is going to happen. And because I said all that, Bob's going to tell you where you can find him and all of the Saints News Network throughout this offseason. Because frankly, you're going to have a lot of clickbaity articles this offseason. You're not going to have that at the Saints News Network. You're going to get A+ reporting with A+ sources. Bob, where can they find you and all that excellent work?
And I appreciate the compliment. And yeah, it is something that we take very seriously, folks. And we're going to give you free agency previews. We're obviously going to give you draft analysis, and draft previews. I pride myself on individual film breakdown, but we're going to do it position by position too, both for free agency and for the draft. Not only myself, Kyle T. Mosley, John Hendricks, Ross Jackson, all of us at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, or the SI.com team page for the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, we're on top of breaking news as soon as it happens. We give you our viewpoints on what could happen, what may not happen, and why something just happened when it happened too. So we'll give you news and editorials combined. So make sure you follow all of us, at the Saints News Network. You can follow my work individually as well. I post all of my pieces on my individual pages. Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 over on Twitter. And obviously, as we tell you each and every single week, as most of you know, if you're sitting here watching this show, the Bayou Blitz Facebook page and Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. Get other Saints fans over, especially as stressful and maybe as sad as some moments are going to be this off season. This is when the most conversations can be struck up too. During the year, it's pretty cut and dry. Hey, they won. This is why. Hey, they lost. This is why. This is what could change. Off season, all windows are open. All doors are open. It's a fun time for debates. And, we do keep things civil, clean, and bully free, in the Bayou Blitz group. So please get other Saints fans over into there. I see people asking all the time, hey, what's a good podcast to watch? Obviously, I throw our name in there. Hey, what's a good chat group? You'll find it there. Trust me. Well, you don't have to trust me because again, if you're watching this show, you probably already know. And we thank you for the support that you have given us. Not only Brendan and I, but all of us at the Saints News Network as well.
And for myself, you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. I want to give a couple more of you a quick shout out. Jerry, thanks for the kind words of awesome show. TJ over
Thank you.
on X. I love that. We get Twitter or X or whatever. What have I been saying? X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. We get comments from there now. So
Awesome.
Elon, you did something right, Elon. But TJ over on X says, thank you guys for all the great work you guys
Thank you.
do. We certainly appreciate you.
Thank you.
And hopefully we're giving you the very best in Saints coverage. Pammy says, great show.
Thank you.
Jerry says, love you all, and I mean it. Man, you guys are all nice here. Is it like it's the off season? Like, is that what it is? All the stress is gone. We can be nice to everybody now.
Maybe.
Maybe that's it. Maybe that's it. Everybody's having a little bit of that extra Christmas eggnog before it goes bad.
Well, that's it. Listen, as soon as Dennis Allen was officially coming back, most of those Saints fans just dug in. Whatever booze was left from New Year's is now gone. So
Bourbon Street doesn't have alcohol, guys. Wonder why. Oh, guys, well, we certainly appreciate it. You can keep up with everything, like Bob said, over the Saints News Network. You can keep up with us individually and through the Bayou Blitz on Facebook and on X. Until next week, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and we will see you right back here next week with the Bayou Blitz. See you then.